It's my privilege and pleasure today to introduce our keynote speakers. Please meet Brian and Maggie Harlow, the parents of two incredible children who've made it big in the music industry. Of course, Jack Harlow, a Grammy-nominated artist, as well as Clay Harlow, a music producer. They were both supported by their parents from the very beginning. Brian and Maggie's story is a touching one, and it sheds light on the true meaning of a strong family unit. They remind us that there's no playbook for parenting and that unconditional love is the key ingredient to a child's success. This is a tale of dreams, perseverance, and unwavering support that I'm sure will inspire and motivate anyone who hears it. Don't miss out on the opportunity to hear from the parents who helped turn a little kid's dream into a reality. Please welcome Jack and Brian Harlow. I'm sorry, Maggie and Brian Harlow.
Can you hear us?
Take it away.
I look a lot like him. I understand. The curly hair. Well, we're thrilled to be here. Thank you so much, Nick, for the introduction. I think what we'd like to do today is just maybe talk a little bit about our parenting, and then open it up for questions if you want to ask questions. Does that sound right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Brian, you want me to go first?
Yes.
All right. Brian and I have been married for going on 30 years. Next year will be our 30th anniversary. And raising our kids really has been the most challenging experience of our lives. And, we've done a lot of challenging things. So that's saying something. I think parenting is incredibly difficult, and it stretched me in ways that I never really anticipated. Outside of just learning to deal with having a successful entertainer for a son, just parenting itself was really tricky. I think my style of parenting was, in a way, Brian and I balanced each other out. So we had an advantage of two different styles of parenting. We learned from each other and we leaned into each other. And I think what Brian taught me as a parent is that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to do something wrong and have to apologize for it, whether it's being too restrictive or being, too lax. He really brought, for me as a parent, this place of, you're going to make mistakes and it's okay. You have to learn to apologize and course correct. So I think that for us, that was a big thing for me to take on. I'm not someone who easily admits when she's wrong. That doesn't come naturally for me. So Brian really helped me learn to do that. From an early age, both of our boys were very interested in what they were interested in. And I think it was sometimes difficult to let them pursue what they wanted to pursue. Clay, our younger son, was very interested in sports. He did soccer, and he wanted to do the travel soccer path of, multiple weekends a month being gone. He was also highly energetic. So there was just this constant desire to be social. He'd spend 48 hours with friends and come home at age 10 and say, when can I have a friend over? And we were like, you need a minute alone. And so we had to learn with both our kids. Jack obviously wanted to be in this world of hip hop. He knew he was a rapper from age 11. And we had to learn to really just live with that. When a kid says at 11 they want to be a rapper, we were 100% like, sure, you got to just get to practicing. Whether or not we believed he would actually do it was just, I didn't know. Sometimes the kids just fall in love with something and they're just excited about it, and you have to let them kind of get it out of their system. So I think in some ways that's what I thought was happening. But we had to learn to make space for each of their desires. And even as it impinged on our lifestyle, we had to kind of make some hard choices. Sometimes we had to say no. And sometimes, we said yes. So you just learn to kind of go back and forth, and you can't always make the right decision. I think for parenting, learning that you're going to make mistakes is hard because you feel this weight of like, I have to do it right. I'm going to mess my kid up. I got to keep them on a path, and the common path is common, but it's not always the right path for your kid. That they may choose to be alone a lot, or they may choose to be incredibly social, or they may pick up a hobby like gaming that you might feel like, well, this is a waste of time. It's hard sometimes to let them just go on their own path. My mother used to say to me all the time, parenting is a very wide road. healthy parenting is really wide. And, eating popcorn for dinner might be blasphemy to some parents, but for me, I was like, yeah, let's have popcorn for dinner. Let's put some cheese on it. And there you go. So it was always just a kind of a learning to feel our way through. And, but learning to admit your mistakes, knowing when maybe you've, either been too lax or too strict, and sometimes questioning my presumptions about their choices was some key things that we did. The other thing that I did when Jack said he wanted to be in hip hop, I wanted to be a rapper, I happened to be a hip hop fan. So I was, I was not upset by this idea. I was like, sure, why not be a rapper? And so one of the things I did to try to make sure I kept him safe as in these situations was I would go with him as often as I could, or Brian would go with him as often as we could. So if he wanted to go to a part of town we weren't necessarily thrilled about and work with people that maybe we would be like, that person does not seem entirely savory, we learned to just accompany him. We learned to get to know these people instead of saying, well, that's crazy. You're not going to go to that part of town and you're not going to work with an adult we don't know. We took the time to well, let's meet this person and let's know this person. Let me have their phone number. Let me know where you're going. Let me be in touch with them. So instead of resisting it, even though it was scary at times, we kind of just learned to collaborate. There were times we said, absolutely not, you're not doing that. But there were many things that we learned to try to get ourselves comfortable with in order to give him the permission he wanted, but with the safety that we wanted. So it was a back and forth with our kids, learning when we had to say no and when we could find a way to say yes. If we could find a way to say yes, we would try to do that. So that's mine in a nutshell. Brian?
Oh, my nutshell is much smaller than that. It's going to be, when you were talking, the one thing I remember saying to Jack, as he's probably 14, was, you got the worst dad you could ever get, son. And that was because he was my first child and I was his only dad. I'm the only person that could be his dad. So every mistake I made, I had to make it on him. And I still made mistakes on number two, but there was some I learned from it, number one, that, helped number two get along better. And you see how people with large families, 4, 5, 6 kids, a sixth kid, it's easy, it's easy for the sixth kid and it's easy for the parents raising the sixth kid comparatively. But yes, so I feel like, when you have your first child, that's going to be the worst job you do, no matter how hard you try.
So true.
I'm happy to take questions, but I didn't have an idea of what I wanted. I mean, what everything Maggie said was the case of how we did everything. Who are we taking questions from?
All right. I wasn't sure if I was muted or not. Okay. So I'm sure this journey has been a very unique one, to say the least. Were there any moments, I guess, through this journey that you had doubts that maybe he was going to continue to pursue this as a career, or maybe not get to the level of success that he wanted to? And if so, how did you deal with that? Or did you always kind of have a feeling that he was going to eventually, break through?
Well, of course we had doubts. I mean, I still have doubts. He's done a lot, but we weren't concerned about our doubts. I mean, we were going to let this go as far as it could go. And see, we had many personal conversations where, we'll see where he's at age 25. And, he's in high school and he's working his way and he's becoming well-known in Louisville. He's becoming well-known in the region. And we were totally content to, have him end up like other groups or individuals who make a name for themselves in their local area, but they don't really get much bigger. And, obviously, he's done better than that. So we were just along for the ride in terms of where it would end up.
Yeah, I think that there were definitely, we always were willing to support him as long as we felt like the right decisions were being made and we were going to help him along that way. So, for example, he lost interest in school, at least the academic side of school. And so we really kind of set the bar and said, okay, well, there's a minimum grade point average you have to maintain. You may be convinced you're not going to college. You may become a famous rapper, right? That may all happen. But we kept a limit on just how much we would let him drop the tray, as you were talking about, Stu. Like, are we going to let him just throw the tray across the floor? No, we made him hold some pieces on his tray that we felt were critical, because let's face it, in life, you do have to do things you don't want to do. And even if someone had said to us, I can tell you the future and he's going to be rich and famous by the time he's 25, we still would have said, great, but you have to maintain some discipline in other parts of your life, because, you know, even when you're rich and famous, you have to have discipline and do things you don't want to do. So being an adult is learning to do the things you don't want to do. So we always believed where he was going to go. We always supported and believed the vision, but we held him to work at things that we felt like were still critical as becoming an adult and learning to be accountable. So a funny story, when he was a senior, he, you know, we literally at a grade point average, which wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot of GPA, but we held him to this GPA. And I told him, we negotiated at the end of the year. We said, you have to have this GPA by the time you graduate, or you're going to be grounded for the first 2 weeks of summer. Like literally first 2 weeks of summer, you're going to spend it at home, which he really did not want to do. And so he got down to literally tenths of a point. And he knew. I even said to him, I said, I don't care what's online in your grades. It doesn't matter to me what's on, like, that is what it is. Don't tell me you have something that's going to be graded in a week, or that your teacher hasn't entered something. It has to be exactly what is online, and nothing else matters to me. So he ended up having to negotiate with one of his teachers to get them to literally enter the grades the last day of school. He literally stood in that teacher's classroom and convinced him, no, I need you to enter the grades right now. And he actually persuaded the teacher to stop what he was doing and enter the grades. And if he hadn't done that, he would have been grounded for 2 weeks. So he learned how to get what he wanted. Like, we learned to give him the guardrails, and he had to operate within that, but then he could have permission to have the other things that he wanted.
I like that. It doesn't matter if you're a Grammy-nominated artist, you're still on the line to get grounded if you don't get your academics in line. I like accountability, discipline. What other values do you feel you all really helped instill in Jack that helped really contribute to his success, besides just being disciplined and accountable?
I mean, I think he gets a lot of his work ethic from us. I don't think we're the hardest working people in the world, but we understand work, and we understand you go do it, you do it right if you can. And from age 12 till this very moment, he works minimum 4 hours a night in the studio, which the studio growing up was his bedroom. And I mean, it's 4 hours, maybe 6, maybe 8, 5 nights a week. Nobody ever asked him to do it. Nobody told him to turn the music down. And this was his dream. And we just said, we'll stay out of your way, but you got to be the one doing it. We never made a phone call for him. I mean, we had people calling us from Def Jam Records and many different places. And of course, we had to sign documents and we had to meet people, but we did not make any steps to make this happen for him. This kid was determined to do this.
I think one of the things that makes me proud about both of our kids as adults is that they are generally on time and acknowledge of the value of other people's time and effort. And it's something that a lot of the people around Jack say is really unique for him as a star. People don't necessarily expect them to be on call, to show up, but he does. If we have meetings, whether it's meetings with us to talk business or whether he's having meetings with other people or we've arranged a meeting for him, he is precisely on time and available and not looking at his phone and not consumed by other things. He's not wearing sunglasses. He meets everyone in the room. He makes sure he knows who's in the room with him. That's definitely his father's doing, probably more than my doing, the punctuality. But I think that's something that makes me proud, because I think valuing other people's time by showing up and, as agreed, holding your agreements, I think is an incredible gift for an adult to have. So I'm very proud of that particular strength they both have.
I think just being present, especially in today's ever-growing technological world where there's so many distractions, is just hugely important. So I definitely think, that I'm sure has played a big role in his success as well. It sounds like, growing up, he had to be on the line for his academics, and he had to spend a lot of time, working at, trying to, at his music. And how did you support his passion for music and keeping him in line with academics while still making sure, because he had a well-rounded childhood as well, because that's just a lot to take in.
I think we let him figure it out for himself, but we just let him know the where the line was. He was very self-directed, and Clay was also very self-directed. So I think we were sort of like you were saying, Stu, where you let them find their way. Maybe I didn't agree with the way they did their academics. I didn't understand it because it was different than the way I did my academics. But we just said this is where the edge is, and let them, learn how to deal with it, learn how to figure it out. And maybe it would be, instead of getting a great score on every test, it would be persuading the teacher to enter every last possible credit. But, whether they did it our way or not, it was just important to us that it got done.
Excellent. Well, to bring things home, one final question. I'm sure there's folks watching at home thinking, I want to support their kids to be able to achieve whatever they want to achieve. So let's say parents are out there, and what piece of, I guess, advice, the biggest advice you would say you would give to a parent who is raising a child with a big dream?
You start.
I would just say be interested. So if your kid says, I want to be a gamer, I want to be a world famous gamer, figure it out. Not in terms of doing it for them, but just know the world, learn to play a video game, right? Be able to log in and see what they're doing. Get access, make sure that they give you access to what they're doing. Learn what it takes to be a gamer. What is it going to mean to be a gamer? You can be a multimillionaire gamer, but what does it mean? And talk about the pros and cons of that. One of the things Jack said was he always wanted to be this superstar, but he also is deeply private. So we had conversations with him frequently about, are you sure you want to be famous? Because you're really, really private. So that is kind of going to be a difficult line for him. So understand what they're really interested, show curiosity, get to know it a little bit, and it will help you help them navigate. Instead of it being like, well, that's your thing. That sounds stupid. You do it. You can help them navigate where the rocks are and keep them on the path.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't have a lot to add to that other than you can't, it's always been said, and Stu just said it, and it's been said for 1,000 years. You can't live your life through them. You got to let them make their mistakes. You have to take a step back and watch a mistake happen. And that is one of the hardest things I think a human being can do, is see somebody stepping off a curb, knowing they're going to step on a pipe, and just fall on the ground. You're just like, oh, but if you can't get there to do it, you can't fix it. And you know that they're going to survive it. You just have to let it happen, because that one moment of learning is more powerful than any warning ahead of time. That's not going to keep them from looking at, stepping off the curb the next time. But falling on their face is going to go. Every time I step off a curb the rest of my life, I'm going to be looking around and see what's down there. So that's what we did, is we tried to just guardrail, just like she said, just see bad things coming and try to knock them out of the way, but also just let them have an experience.
I know Nick said final question, but I'd like to ask one real final question. Here it is. We talk so often about all of the tough things that kids face and having them be able to carry those things and deal with those things. What are some of the things that parents need to be aware of about supporting a kid who is getting all these great things that are happening? There's all this awesome stuff. There's all these accolades, all this fame that, he is a private person, but he's still getting all this stuff. And that can be just as hard and just as really can cause some difficulties with some kids if they get that too quickly. So can you talk just a bit about that?
Yeah. I think the first thing is honesty. And Jack's always said it about me in particular, but both Maggie and I. If he does a song I don't like, I didn't like that song. I don't say, hey, it was really good. And, I say, I didn't like it. I didn't like, and then he'll say, what didn't you like about it? And I tell him. But I think it's important to build their self-esteem with positive and negative. I'm not Mr. I'm going to say nice things to you just to make you feel good, So I think honesty is huge, and letting them know that. I've said the words to him. You're not the most important person in the world, and you got to hear that. You have to hear that. If you can say, well, of course he knows that, but if your father or your mother looks you in the eye and says you're not the most important person in the world, there's a little bit of a wake up call. So I think it's important to say that kind of stuff. Go ahead.
Yep, I think Brian is right about that, and I think you also have to help prepare them that it won't always be that way. It won't always be great. Sometimes talking about that you can chase these accolades and then it fades. Like it doesn't necessarily, it can't last. That either the feeling is going to fade or someday you're going to get a bad review. And part of learning to deal with accolades is not getting too attached to it. Like this is the end all be all. It's not the end all be all. You might win every award in the world and it still may not fill you if you don't really love yourself and you're not really okay with who you are. So I think that it's hard to know how to prepare kids for that, but both of our kids, especially, I think Clay was particularly good at it. He might lose a soccer game and it could be horrible. It could be the final of a championship. But an hour later, he would just bounce back and we wouldn't drag it out. We wouldn't constantly talk about the failure or the success. It becomes great job and we move on. It doesn't something that we obsess over, that they won something or lost something. It's just how life is. You win and you lose. So I think starting young in that conversation, that winning the spelling bee is great, congrats, but losing it is okay too. That in adulthood they can deal with that as well. That it's up and down, and it doesn't even always matter in the end.
Excellent. Well, Brian and Maggie, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom today. As a new parent, as you can see, I have a little 4-month-old here. A lot of great, just little pearls of wisdom that I really appreciate you all offering, and as well as to everyone else that's watching in today. Obviously, I'm sure you're immensely proud of your kids, not only for just their success, but for also being just well-rounded, good people. And I think that, when someone might go down the path of wanting to be successful, it's easy to lose sight of who they are as people, but you've been managed to raise a well-rounded individuals that are both successful, not just in their careers, but in life as well. So thank you very much for your time. I found it very insightful and just really appreciate you all being here today. And I look forward to seeing your kids' continued success as well as your own as well.
Thank you. And thanks for what you're doing with Mr. Stu TV. I think it's beautiful. I've enjoyed watching.
Thank you very much.
See you guys.